This is a video to introduce Trello. The first tip applies to getting good at most things. So what I recommend for using Trello is to keep the browser open throughout the day, and Trello will update automatically as there are updates made to it. There's also a fantastic mobile app which you can download. I use the Android version, and I believe the iOS version is probably the same. And it's excellent because it has most of the functionality that the desktop version does, but you can use it while you're sitting on the couch, while you're on the beach, while you're riding bareback on a horse. So it's really a recommended tool to stay connected when you're not in the office. The second tip for using Trello, and a requirement for using it well, is to create cards. Cards are the equivalent of tasks, and so cards can be used both very specifically and also more generally to achieve a particular set of goals. Creating a card is really simple. You'll see text for Add Card, and you'll also see in the top right corner a little plus icon that lets you create cards. Creating cards is basically the equivalent of creating tasks. The third tip for how to get the most out of Trello is to get other team members involved. To get people involved, there's really two key things to keep in mind. The first is adding team members to the board itself. Once these team members are added, they can see and interact with the board in the same way you can. Once you have the core team associated with the board, what you're going to want to do is assign individual tasks to some of those teammates. What this means really is who you're making responsible for each card, as an important part of making sure work happens overall. We will discover together how best to control that process, because we don't necessarily want everyone assigning everything to each other. But for now, as you see fit for the projects, feel free to assign cards to teammates who you believe can help you. The fourth tip for effective Trello use is once you've assigned team members to individual cards, you're going to want to ensure that those cards and that project can get completed in a timely fashion, and that means you're going to want to assign due dates. Assigning due dates is a pretty critical part of what we do. To assign the due date, you're simply going to click this section within the card and select the appropriate date and time that you need this task completed by. It is strongly recommended that you follow up with individual teammates to ensure that they are clear about the deliverable that they owe you for that card. Another tip for effective Trello use is to make use of lists. Lists can be accessed within the card itself, and you can click on the right-hand side in this little section here that lets you create lists. A list is really useful when you're trying to achieve a particular task that contains subtasks. This is usually the case. There are things that you're trying to accomplish, and the bigger they are, the more subtasks that are involved with them. In this respect, cards are really quite useful as a project management concept because it can be something very specific or something very large. But the whole element of lists allows you to break down that thing into smaller things that need to get accomplished so that you can then complete that card. Once you assign the card to different team members, this gives them a better idea of what is required to complete the card. So I'm going to offer 2 pointers on how to name checklists. One thing I like to do is, if there are a series of deliverables tied to that specific goal, then you can name the checklist for that goal. You can also create deliverables for specific weeks. So I will also name a checklist for whatever this week or next week is, and it allows you to see when you're doing what. And essentially, it's pretty straightforward. You can copy and paste individual items into the checklist. It will then create those individual tasks within the checklist. And as you mark off that these have been done, it tells you how complete you are with that specific checklist. I find this to be a really useful tool, especially because oftentimes the devil is in the details, and accomplishing a single task is usually the result of checking off a lot of individual details and small tasks. I also like this when you set a due date because, similar to Google Calendar, what it will do is send you an invite to let you know that something is due soon. So that helps to keep me organized. Another tip for getting the most out of Trello is staying involved in what is happening on a particular card, and at different times you may have different people involved in a card, And so, as opposed to needing to constantly check the card and what's happening on that, you can simply subscribe to the updates on the card. Subscribing is really simple. Once you're in the card on the right-hand side for subscribe, just click that, and anytime there is an update to the card, you will receive an email notification for that card. And nobody's going to be necessarily updating your cards unless you update your cards. So to help them do that, you, of course, want to invite teammates, but you can also share the URL specifically for this card. To do that, you're going to click this little link here within the bottom right corner of the card. And then you can copy and paste and share that with teammates via Skype or email. That allows them to see all the details associated specifically with that card. So that's really it. I know there's more to Trello, but I think that's a pretty good beginner's guide. Thus far, most of the service team is pretty well versed in using it, and there seems to be a universal consensus that it is a more effective tool than Google Project Documents for managing our work. To be clear, this does not replace Google Calendar, and it also does not replace Google Project Docs. Google Calendar will always be important, especially for people on the service team who are meeting with clients or having meetings. And Google Project Documents is meanwhile always going to be useful if we need to share information directly with clients. Happy Trelloing, if that's a word.